Hello, Brooklyn. My name is Julia Weeks, and I am here with Isra Pananon. We are your host of Navy Our Neighbor Brooklyn. We are a local beat highlighting community in and around the Brooklyn Navy Yard to foster connections and belonging. And we have a great show for you today. We have the legal director of the Street Vendor Project, who is a dear friend, Matt Shapiro, on with us. So I am going to shortly welcome him, but first I am going to bring Isra on. Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Great, so good. So we're going to bring Matt on, and Isra's going to get this show on the road.
Hey.
Hey.
Good to see you, Matt. Thanks for coming on the show. The last time I think we saw you, we were having some beer. So and a lot has transpired since then. So I'm glad we get to reconnect, albeit over a screen.
Happy to be here.
So let's start the show off by just telling us a little bit about Matt Shapiro. Who is Matt Shapiro? Where are you from? Are you a New Yorker? What brought you to New York?
It's funny. I heard someone else talk about this, whether or not they consider themselves a New Yorker recently. And I guess I'm not sure I can call myself a New Yorker because I wasn't born here. But I've lived here now, I guess, for 13 years. 14 years. So I guess I'm the closest thing to a New Yorker without being a New Yorker, because I love the city, and I have such a strong connection now to the city after being here for so many years. So I don't know what the word is, but pretty close to a New Yorker.
Yeah, but, so you said you've been here for 13 years. And so what parts of the city have you lived in? Well, now you're in Queens.
Yeah, it's funny. This is my first time living in Queens. I first came, I lived on the Upper East, or on the border of Upper East Side in East Harlem. And then I moved down to the Village, and then I was overseas for a year, and then I moved to Chinatown, and now to Jackson Heights in Queens.
Nice. So you basically live where all the good food spots are.
I would say that.
So you are the legal director of the Street Vendor Project, and I would love for you to give folks an intro of like what the Street Vendor Project does, who you advocate for, and a little bit more about your organization.
Sure. So the Street Vendor Project is part of the Urban Justice Center, and we are sort of like a union or a worker center for all of the people that you see selling food and merchandise on the streets and sidewalks in New York City. So we're a membership-based organization, which means that vendors will join the organization as members. And then what we do is we organize vendors so they can have a voice in all of the policy considerations that affect them. And we also provide legal services and small business services for our members.
Nice. And really appreciate you and your teammates for doing that work. So shout out to you and all your colleagues that fight every day for the folks that basically feed New Yorkers day in, day out. So Julia is actually going to pull up a video, which gives us a better glimpse at all the things you just mentioned. And so she's going to put it on the screen here and press play.
We've been at this corner for 22 years. We used to be in front of the hospital until they made that law change in 2011, I believe. When Bloomberg was in office, they made a new law, a few different laws as far as to where you can't vend. And in front of the hospital was one of them where they prohibited vending for some reason, just to make things more difficult, as if they weren't already difficult with the laws. And then, we had to move across the street and lost a lot of business because of it, obviously, because people get used to you being in a certain spot. They think you're some different vendor. They think it's different food, a million things they think. People are starting to know now that I'm back, so maybe they feel more comfortable with me here. I joke around with them very much. I know some of them family members. I try to I do have a pretty good relationship with them as the years went by. You know, I always try to make it stronger. You know, even if they don't come here to buy something, how you doing? How was your weekend? How's your kids? You know, just to make them, you know, smile on their face, whatever the case may be. So, sir, white sauce, hot sauce? I'm grateful I have something, you know, to pay the bills. You know, got a few dollars coming in, so 2 kids, one's in high school, another one over here riding his bike around somewhere, always wanting something to eat, so at least it provides for him. You know what I mean? It has its pros and cons. You don't have to answer to nobody. It's got some good stuff to it, you know.
So that was a really short clip, but in a lot of ways, it's also very powerful. So I've never seen that short the clip before, but it makes me think about how our street vendors are also therapists. They talk to you, they greet you, you know, they ask you about your day, and then also just such powerful stories behind them too. You know, like trying to provide for their families, they're doing this day in and day out to make a living. So this video was made. It looks like the date was November 4th, 2019. So that was almost a year ago. And wow. So obviously a lot has transpired since then. And wanted to ask how the coronavirus is impacting how has it impacted street vendors over the past few months?
It's impacted them very severely in a couple different ways. The first is that since street vendors are mostly immigrants living in immigrant communities, from a public health standpoint, personally, they've been impacted by the virus more so than other communities in New York City. So personally, there's been more documented cases in those immigrant communities. But from a business standpoint, they've also suffered really greatly because when the lockdown, when the quarantine happened, the streets were quiet, and of course, vendors rely on foot traffic for their business. Whether they rely on tourist foot traffic, if they're selling in like Times Square, for example, or they rely on neighborhood foot traffic, if they're selling out in a more residential or neighborhood community. So all of that vanished, within the span of a week or so. So they suffered for their health and they suffered for their business.
Yeah, that's just it's just upsetting. And so I'm gonna bring back Julia. No, there she is, and we can talk a little bit more about the things that people can do to support the street vendor project. That's why it's hard for me to say that. Street vendor project and street vendors in general.
Awesome. Thank you, Isra. And thank you again, Matt, for just joining us tonight. We had kind of talked via email, and there was an article that I had recently seen in Eater, and I want to share that with folks. And they were talking about, obviously how many street vendors, haven't come back yet. Some have come back yet, but will the people come back, And so how is that going? Are people coming back? Like, what is that situation? Like currently, I know you live in Jackson Heights, which is the kind of mecca of street vendors. One of our favorite places to go, even though, of course, we love Brooklyn. But if you could talk to us about that, that would be great.
Yeah, so we're lucky here in Jackson Heights, where there are a lot of vendors that have come back. It looks to be about back to the same amount pre-pandemic, because the vendors here really serve the local community. But then if you go to places in Manhattan, for example, Midtown Manhattan and downtown Manhattan, where they're either serving tourists or they're serving primarily office workers, it's still very sparse around those neighborhoods because we know that the vast majority of office workers have not returned to their buildings. So all of the coffee carts in the mornings and lunch carts in the afternoons, the vast majority of them either have not returned back to work, or if they have, they're working only a couple days a week and really experiencing huge declines in their business.
And that's it's just so sad, to hear and to see and to read about, because I'm sure they rely, just like you see in the video with the hot dog vendor. I mean, these are people, these are entrepreneurs, hardworking, have families. I know the Street Vendor Project has set up an emergency relief fund. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what those proceeds kind of go to?
Sure. So when this all happened, we were thinking about, what vendors really needed. And because of different reasons, street vendors were largely left out of, the typical coronavirus relief that existed, like stimulus checks and unemployment. That's because of immigration reasons, and also because of the fact that many vendors have informal businesses and don't have the necessary documentation or paperwork in order to apply for many of the loans and grants that the government was issued. So there wasn't a lot of relief help out there for them. So we decided to start our own fund. So you can check it out on our website, streetvendor.org, and you can contribute to our Street Vendor Project Relief Fund. And we have sent out already thousands of dollars to vendors. We've raised $144,000. We've been sending out gift cards to many, many hundreds of vendors, and hope to continue doing it as long as people contribute.
And it's kind of open-ended until you hit your goal. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to keep going. The need is still there. I mean, we sent out like a couple rounds of gift cards, and people are still, asking like, oh, is there any more opportunities available? Is there any more funding? It's difficult, but as long as people are generous and want to support vendors, support them first by going out in the street and buying from them, but also if you can contribute to the GoFundMe.
Great. And we know there was a big meeting, kind of a rally. I guess it was Thursday or Friday. I can't remember the exact day now about this bill 1116. So if you could tell people about that, that's been in the news a lot.
Yeah, sure. So about a number of years ago, or maybe 4 years ago now, we launched a campaign to increase the number of permits for street food vendors. And that's because the number of permits that the city can issue has been capped since 1983. So if you want to be a vendor, you need to get one of these permits, and you can't get one legally, so you have to go to this underground market. It's very complicated, and vendors either have to shell out tens of thousands of dollars for permits, or they have to vend without a permit, which is a huge risk and results in really strict enforcement. So we started a campaign to get the city to change this law and increase the number of permits. So that's what the City Council bill, City Council Intro 1116 would do. And we're sort of at an interesting point in time where the city is looking towards different areas of relief for businesses and people that have been really hit hard by the virus. So we think that now is a really, really important time where the city could do something for street vendors and give them more opportunities, legalize the vendors that are vending without permits, and provide some relief to those that rent them on the underground market. They allowed restaurants to do open dining. I think in 2 days they granted 4,000 permits for restaurants to use public space, but they still haven't done anything for street vendors. So hopefully they will, and that's what the rally was on Thursday, just calling attention to why now, more than ever, this bill should be passed.
That's excellent. We would just want to show people a little clip from the rally of the street vendors organizing, because I think it's really powerful to see there's power in numbers. And so let's just share that with folks really quick. So let me stop sharing it now. But when is the deadline for the city council to sign that bill?
Well, the session goes until the end of 2021. But this bill has been introduced since 2018. So we're getting towards the end of the session, and we hope something will happen this fall. But we really need the Speaker of the City Council, Corey Johnson, to bring it to a vote. He's the major player here. Him and of course the mayor. So that's what we did on Thursday, is really bringing a lot of vendors and allies and also elected officials together who support vendors to call on the Speaker to bring this to a vote, because there's 30 of the council members support this bill. They've signed on as co-sponsors, but the Speaker has yet to bring it to the floor for a vote.
How many street vendors are currently out there on the streets?
So there's no exact count. We estimate, if you talk about all types of vendors, not just food vendors, somewhere between 10 and 20,000. And that includes vendors that have permits, vendors that don't have permits, vendors that sell merchandise, vendors that sell artwork. So that's what we estimate.
And then this, if he signs this bill, if Corey Johnson signs this bill, an additional 4,000 street vendors could legally be on the streets, or?
So it's not exactly that an additional 4,000 would be there. It would grant additional 4,000 food vendor permits, and that would be spread out over 10 years, right? So 400 permits a year for food vendors. So some of those permits would go to people that are already vending, and they're either vending without a permit, or they're vending with a permit that they've rented from someone. So it's not that 4,000 new people would be out there. It's that 4,000 permits would be out there.
I see. And who enforces? Because I think that was some contention maybe in the bill as well. Who makes sure that the street vendors, I guess, the health codes are up to date, and who is enforcing those laws? Because it's no longer the police. Is that correct?
The police are still doing some enforcement now. There was an announcement a few weeks ago by the mayor that said that the police will no longer be the ones enforcing, but there's a slow transition that's taking place while the administration figures out how to divide up the roles. So for food vendors, you're absolutely correct that the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene enforces the health code. Many people don't know, but food vendors have to follow the exact same health code that restaurants do. And even now they're getting letter grades. So you might have seen the letters like restaurants do on some of the food vendor carts and trucks.
And I'm sure food vendors obviously are wearing masks and wearing gloves in this time of coronavirus, and are being especially careful, just like all of us are.
Yeah, every vendor I've seen, I think they know that they know that the customers expect it, and they know that they need to do it for their own protection as well, and for the protection of the food they're serving.
Yes, absolutely. Well, Israel and I often say if we didn't live in Brooklyn, we would be living in Queens, and we would be living in Jackson Heights, where you guys live, because we think there's some of the best food in the world there, from Indian, Tibetan, Nepalese, Thai food in Elmhurst, which is just bordering Jackson Heights. Just so many delicious things to eat, which kind of brings me to my next question: is why is there so much street food in Queens compared to other boroughs?
Yeah, so I think Queens is the most diverse place in the world, the highest number of languages spoken here. So that just means that we have the most amount of immigrant communities. And a lot of the communities that live here have really rich street food cultures back in their home countries. So if you think about in Mexico and Ecuador and Colombia and the Himalayan region in India, Bangladesh. So a lot of those people, when they move here, they start businesses to sort of bring a taste of their home country to people who live in the community, because it's predominantly the same immigrants that move to these communities that all live together. So when you have an area that's just really, really diverse, you're going to have great street food, thankfully.
Awesome. Well, I think we wanted to talk to you a little bit more about street food. So I'm gonna let Isra pop in here.
I just want to say that we probably should move to Queens, because every time I ask Julia what she wants to eat, she names a place, and then it sounds like an immigrant's place, and I'm like, well, where is it? And she says Queens, and I'm like, always. So then we gotta figure out a way to get there, but we probably should just move to where you're at. Okay, so I want to switch gears a little and talk to you about a little more about you. So what's your favorite street food in New York City? I know that's a tall question, because it's a very broad question, but we'd love to hear. You can do your favorite vendor food in each borough, or just give us your top faves.
So, I mean, when I was working in the office in downtown Manhattan, my favorite, of course, would be the classic chicken and lamb over rice. I mean, that's like one of the only street foods that's really, it's not really from somewhere else. It's a New York a street food creation, because it has the influences from the immigrant communities that brought here, but it doesn't exist exactly like that in any other country. I was somewhere I think I was in Vermont, and there was a place that was advertising New York chicken over rice. It was really, really funny. So that's, I think, my favorite when I'm in the office, because there's a lot of good places around downtown Manhattan that make great chicken over rice. Out here in Queens, like you said, we're spoiled. I've been really into the Bangladeshi street food that's here on the corner of 37th and 74th. There's 2 carts that sell a Bangladeshi fuchka, which goes by different names. India, it's pani puri or golgappa. It's basically these little wafers that are filled with spiced potatoes and filled with chutneys and tamarind water. Sort of like when you think of explosive flavors of India, that's what you get. So it's right a block away from my apartment. So I'm pretty spoiled to have that.
I'm smiling because we love them, and I actually actually our friend Urgency, who's tuned in right now, she came with us to get some, I think probably like a few months ago, but she said she didn't like, you know how they crush little pieces of egg on top. I don't think she said, yeah, so she was like, I don't like those, but I personally like it on top of the fuchka. I don't. It's the most interesting food I've ever eaten in my life, and I could eat like 50 of them.
Yeah, it's such like it's everything you want between like tangy and spicy and sweet and crunchy. I mean, Indian and Bangladeshi chat, like those little snacks, are known for that. So, yeah, those are delicious.
Well, I didn't mean to stop your roll. So, any other recommendations for the crowds out here?
Trying to think. If you go to the Bronx, I'm not sure if he's still working, but there's a guy named Angel. He's kind of famous now, who sells this a roast pork from the South Bronx. La Lechonera, La Piranha. And he has this trailer in the South Bronx. Look him up, and he roasts these huge roast pork slabs, and he chops it with a machete. And there's the crispy skin and the meat, and it's incredible. And he is such a neighborhood character. So that's the best street food I've had in the Bronx. I highly recommend it.
So Urgency responded. We just put it up on the screen here. Fuchka is amazing. We just don't add eggs in Calcutta. So
it's interesting. I noticed the eggs. I noticed the eggs too, and I really love anything with eggs. So I thought it was a Bengali addition because the owners of those 2 carts are from Bangladesh. But maybe it's different. Maybe it's regional. Maybe in Calcutta they don't have it, but in Bangladesh and different neighbors they add the egg. But I'm not from that area, so I can't really comment on what the right way is, of course. But I love eggs, so I love it.
We love Urgency because she loves to eat. So, and one of the reasons why we love you too. So, you and Jeff. So we should tell people we know Matt through a very talented food writer and food blogger, Jeff Orlick, who started the Momo Crawl actually in Jackson Heights many moons ago. So we want to talk to you about what we can do to help street vendors. But first, we're hoping you could tell us a little bit about the sabbatical you took in Southeast Asia. And did you do that with the Street Vendor Project? Could you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah.
Sure. No, it was completely personal and completely leisure. It was not. It wasn't. Well, actually, there was one part of it that was work related. That was kind of cool. That was just by happenstance. But that was the end of 2000 or beginning of 2013. My wife and I left New York for about a year and a quarter, and traveled around Asia, mostly Southeast Asia, but also into Japan and the Indian subcontinent. And we had been on a few shorter trips to the region several years prior, and we had thought that, hey, we met a lot of people who were traveling sort of longer term, and we were on, sort of a 2 or 3 week shorter trip. So we said, oh, well, we should do that. We should leave for a year. And we're pretty motivated by the other travelers that we met, and we fell in love with the region when we were visiting on the shorter trips, and there was so much more we wanted to see. And at first we thought, oh, well, we could go to countries all around the world in a year, and then we tend to travel rather slowly, so we said, oh, let's just focus on one region. And we could have spent more time. There were countries in the region we didn't even go to. So we could have spent more time there. And it was just, it was a change in the routine, a really great experience, and really even, further made, increase my love for New York City because we have such diversity here. It made me realize, or not realize, but affirm the belief that the world is a great place and people are great by and large.
Well, Isra and I took our first trip to Thailand this January, before all of this happened, and so you had given us some really good recommendations for Phuket and Bangkok and some of those areas. And so, Isra, when was the last time you went to Thailand? Can you tell people?
Oh, it was a very, very long time ago, since I was 7. And yeah, so it's been, what, 29 years. Well, now 30 years, but at the time it was 29 years.
That's amazing. You have family still there?
Yeah, a lot of extended family on both my mother and my father's side. So, but also just family members I have only met since probably I was a kid. So I don't really know, which to me is like a terrible shame that, I haven't been back to visit more, because when I went there, I found like such a deep connection in a way that I actually didn't think I'd feel, because, I was born here, I lived my life here. But it was a really meaningful experience. So anyways, thanks for the recommendations. We had a great time, and hope to do it all over again, when the coronavirus is over.
We had some of the best street food, though. Just the roti and the noodles, and oh my God, it was just so good. All of it.
Yeah.
And so cheap.
Yeah, such great value there, and I think it's great because we have we're lucky in New York to have a lot of diverse Thai food, but then of course when you go to the country, you realize how regional the food is, like anywhere, right? Mm-hmm. It's not Thai food. You're eating Central Thai food or Northern Thai food or Southern Thai food or Muslim Thai food or Chinese Thai food, right? It's so regional, and you really get to experience that when you travel to the country, so that's great.
And the people and the culture just couldn't be beat. And so kind of we want to talk to you about Anthony Bourdain just a little bit, because you represented the Street Vendor Project on an episode. Was it No Reservations or
Parts Unknown?
Parts Unknown, right? When Anthony Bourdain visited Queens. So could you tell people kind of how you got involved in that, where you went to eat, and what that experience was like?
Yeah, I think so. We had been in touch with the producers of the show for a few times, talking about I think it was when he was planning on doing that food market on the west side of Manhattan. So we got to chatting about like how can we get local street vendors involved, and that's sort of how we met the folks that worked with him. And then when it turned out that he was going to be shooting a Queens episode, they reached out to us to talk about what street food should they eat in Queens. And we didn't really know what they were looking for, if they just wanted some tips or if they wanted us to like introduce him to vendors. But then it turned out that they wanted to have like a conversation about street vending, the policies and the politics while eating at a vendor in Queens. Yeah, like everyone says, it was really cool. He was really genuine and so generous with his time. He would, he let us film a little clip in support of our campaign to get more permits. And you could tell that he really, really cared about the street vending community and how important it was to New York City. So that was a great experience.
And where did you guys go? Where did you go eat?
Oh, we ate at a Ecuadorian food cart on Warren Street and Roosevelt Avenue. You can go there. Usually there's like a few of them next to a long line of Ecuadorian food trucks on Warren. So you can go there now and go to the cart. You'll see all the Ecuadorian specialties like roast pork and blood sausage and fried pork and potato cakes and big corn. That area has tons of great Ecuadorian food, and it's really unique because that type of street food and that type of food doesn't really exist in many other parts of the city, because there's such a strong Ecuadorian community in Corona, Queens, where we ate. So yeah, it's just a fantastic place to visit.
Oh, that clip, or that we were watching Parts Unknown, and we said, "That's Matt." So I think we knew you had met him, but we hadn't actually seen the episode. So if people, actually go back and watch, it's Parts Unknown Queens, and such a fabulous episode. And Matt is in the very beginning. So we have a question from Rose Horowitz, who is a dear friend and colleague, and she wants to know if you have eaten in Flushing, Queens.
Oh, well, yes, many, many, many times. But there's an interesting story there. Flushing was really known for its great street food. There were many Chinese street food vendors that were selling in the downtown area of Flushing, and they recently, within the past couple of years, got kicked out by the local city council member Peter Koo. And there's a lot of controversy over what's been happening to Flushing, Queens. Even recently, there have been some articles coming out about the gentrification of Flushing, Queens, and how there's more sort of upscale development. And so what he did is he restricted all the downtown streets to street vendors. So he kicked them all out. And then slowly, little by little, all of the local mom and pop, or not all of them, but a lot of the local mom and pop restaurants are being closed because the landlords are hiking their rent and looking for more upscale, sometimes international chains and restaurants that are able to pay higher rent. So it's really, really sad. And I know there are a lot of great groups in Flushing that are doing good work to fight against that. But Flushing was known for its great street food, tons of really good Chinese barbecue carts selling the lamb skewers and the chicken skewers and all types of different grilled meats. But they've been pushed really to the outer fringes of Flushing because of those restrictions.
So thanks for answering that question. So the second question comes from, this is the period where we take questions from the crowd here. Urgency asks, what kind of assistance are food vendors getting or not getting compared to brick and mortar restaurants?
So if you're a food vendor and you have documented immigration status here, you can apply for unemployment. That new kind of pandemic unemployment assistance that self-employed people could apply for. But if you don't have immigration status here, documented immigration status here, then you don't get anything, and you certainly can't apply for any of the government loans and grants that were available through the either federal Small Business Administration or the state Small Business Administration. So a vast majority of the vending community isn't eligible for either of those two things. So they were sort of left out to dry. Restaurants tend to be more formal operations where they'll be able to, have someone who does have documented immigration status here, and they could apply for a lot of those. There was the PPP loans that turned into grants if you would use them for your payroll. Vendors really had a hard time applying for those given their immigration status and the informality of their business.
Wow, I didn't even think about, to be honest, the immigration status, how big of an impact that can have for just, survival right now. So wanted to ask, we have a few people watching. You've talked about the bill that's happening. You talked about some of your advocacy and with the current state of things. I just want to ask, what is it, as citizens, what are the things that we can do right now to support all of our street vendors?
The easiest thing you can do is buy things from them. A tip if you can, tip well if you can. On a policy level, if you're really into it, call the city council speaker, Corey Johnson. Call his office, ask him to pass Intro 1116, because the vendors deserve more permits for the first time since 1983. That would be a huge thing to do if you could pick up the phone and call his office. You can Google New York City Council Corey Johnson. You'll find his office number on his website. Another thing you can do, as I mentioned before, is contribute to our GoFundMe. I know the website link was up there before, but it's streetvendor.org. Those things would really go a long way.
Great. And kind of we'll end on this. If you could tell people how they can follow you personally on Instagram, how they can follow the Street Vendor Project, just kind of closing thoughts.
I'm not too active personally on Instagram, but definitely check out the Street Vendor Project. That's the handle. At Twitter is Vendor Power, I believe. And you can stay up to date with everything we're doing, all of our campaigns. If we put out a call to action, it'll be on there. And you can see some great photos and great videos. And look, Karina's there with Corey Johnson's office number right there in the notes. She's on top of it, which is great. And I I'm so glad we were able to do this. The last time we saw all three of us were together, we were drinking beer. But Julia, I think we were huddled in a really crowded Xi'an Famous Foods,
That's right.
which with like, it's such a small space in downtown, but I felt like there was 100 people there.
We couldn't do that in this day and age, huh?
It's so sad. All the things we took for granted. That's the message, right? Don't take anything for granted. Don't take your street vendors for granted. They're trying to make a living. They're trying to support their families. Everyone go out there and get a plate of chicken over rice or a plate of roast pork from Roosevelt Avenue.
Awesome. And we just want to say that Rose just said, and we'll end on this, she grew up 10 minutes from Flushing, and then she's sorry to hear about this, but she says on Saturday she used to take the bus and eat a slice at Gloria's Pizza. So that sounds divine, Rose. I think we could all go for a good slice right about now.
Sounds good.
But thank you so much, Matt, and we look forward to seeing you IRL, hopefully sooner rather than later. Maybe we could get a Respato or something on the socially distance in Jackson Heights.
Yeah, it sounds good. Let me know if you make your way out here.
We absolutely will. And congratulations to you and your wife on your new baby. And all the best. And we look forward to seeing you soon.
So great. Thanks.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Matt.